And hello, everybody. How are we doing today? I hope you're having a lovely day, and thank you so much for the gifted subs, Purple Enjoyer. Silly names for a silly person. Love it, appreciate it. It's wonderful and amazing. I need to double check and make sure that my desktop audio is off, because we don't want to hear all the alerts and everything, right? No. Whoa, what happened to my voice? What's wrong with my voice? Is it because I'm talking quietly and gently? I can speak a little bit clearer if you want. I know. Yeah, it's because I'm going to be reading a book and we need tranquility and peace for while we read the book. And I still need to figure out exactly how my voice is going to be for when I read. Because I like the idea of reading very gently. But if I get too whispery, you can always let me know. I have a new kind of tea today. You should do British. No. No, I can't do that. That would be offensive. That would be so rude to British people. I have a lovely tea, though. Lovely, lovely, absolutely lovely. It is some kind of, I think it's like a berry Bellini tea. It's, I know, cringe, cringe, but you know, what can we do? It's actually quite delicious. And it's one that I luckily don't need to add milk to. Or cream. Cream. Ugh. So, there we go. Perfect. So, what happened last time on our lovely little adventure is Jane has begun her work at the, uh, what is it? Not Rochester. Yeah, Rochester. Herp derp derp. She's begun working at the estate for Mr. Rochester and his kind of adopted daughter. It's not his daughter, but it certainly is someone's daughter. But he took her in as, I think, a ward of some kind. And, yeah, so Jane's been serving as her teacher. That's been going quite lovely. She's gotten to meet some of the other employees, which was also quite lovely. And, someone tried to set Mr. Rochester on fire, but she luckily got there just in time to dump some water on him. But now they're both trying to do a bit of sleuthing, a bit of mystery solving, and they're trying to figure out who done it. And after they figure out who done it, they're going to figure out how to punish who done it. They're gonna get her arrested, I'm guessing. We already kind of know who it is. I am starting chapter 16 over since it's been a little bit. And also, since last time it was cut quite short by Tiny Human needing a bit of attention and needing some, assistance. I hope you all enjoy me reading. I'm sorry, I'm getting my voice kind of warmed up just by talking. I'm checking on my fingernails too, because Lily got false nails, and we just removed them today. And, yeah, that was an experience. That was one heck of an experience. All right. Sit up properly. Fix the chair. Someone keeps adjusting my chair. Someone's been in my room again. I hate that. I hate it. I'm kidding. Fucking Labyrinth. What a good movie. What a good time. What a good movie. Nice big deep breaths. Getting nice and comfy. We are a little bit too over to the right, so I'm unable to scoot in right now. I'm going to remedy that. Boost taste. There we go. Cozy vibes. Cozy, chill, relaxed vibes. As I tremble because Lily took her inhaler. But yeah, how's everyone's day been going, by the way? I hope it's been going wonderfully. My day's been going kind of slow, but relaxing as well, which is good. I enjoy nice, relaxing days. Okay, gonna just tilt everything, make sure everything is good, because I need to both be able to read and emote, express myself. Anyway, 11 minutes in is about when we're starting on. Thank you for the head pats. I really appreciate it, Loa. Chapter 16. I both wished and feared to see Mr. Rochester on the day which followed this sleepless night. I wanted to hear his voice again, yet feared to meet his eye. During the early part of the morning, I momentarily expected his coming. He was not in the frequent habit of entering the schoolroom, but he did step in for a few minutes sometimes, and I had the impression that he was sure to visit it that day. But the morning passed just as usual. Nothing happened to interrupt the quiet course of Adele's studies. Only soon after breakfast I heard some bustle in the neighborhood of Mr. Rochester's chamber. Mrs. Fairfax's voice, and Leah's, and the cook's, and that is John's wife, and even John's own gruff tones. There were exclamations of "What a mercy master has not burnt in his bed!" It is always dangerous to keep a candle lit at night. How providential that he had presence of mind to think of the water jug. I wonder he waked nobody. It is to be hoped he will not take cold with sleeping on the library sofa, etc. To much confabulation succeeded a sound of scrubbing and setting to rights, and when I passed the room, in going downstairs to dinner, I saw through the open door that all was again restored to complete order. Only the bed was stripped of its hangings. Leah stood up in the window seat, rubbing the panes of glass dimmed with smoke. I was about to address her, for I wished to know what account she had been given of the affair. But on advancing, I saw a second person in the chamber, a woman sitting on a chair by the bedside table. By the bedside, no, not the table. I added a table in there. I oopsie doopsie added a table to the scene. By the bedside there might have been a table, but we're not sure quite yet, and sewing rings to new curtains. That woman was none other than Grace Poole, which is the one that we're suspicious that she's the one that did it, by the by. Let's see. There she sat, staid and taciturn looking, as usual, in her brown stuff gown, her check apron, white handkerchief, and cap. She was intent on her work, in which her whole thoughts seemed absorbed. On her hard forehead and in her commonplace features was nothing either of the paleness or desperation one would have expected to see marking the countenance of a woman who had attempted murder, and whose intended victim had followed her last night to her lair, and, as I believed, charged her with the crime she wished to perpetrate. I had a welcome in. Just so you know, Tuesdays are the days that I don't really do shout-outs, but everyone, Haddock is delightful. This is chapter 16 of Jane Eyre, if anyone wants to read along or just generally enjoy it, just for context. I was amazed, confounded. She looked up, while I still gazed at her. No start, no increase or failure of color betrayed emotion, consciousness of guilt, or fear of detection. "Aw, thank you. I appreciate it." She said, "Good morning, miss," in her usual phlegmatic and brief manner. "Good morning, no, fuck." In her usual phlegmatic and brief manner, and taking up another ring and more tape, went on with her sewing. I will put her to some test, thought I. Such absolute impenetrability is past comprehension. "Good morning, Grace," I said. "Has anything happened here? I thought I heard the servants all talking together a while ago." Only Master had been reading in his bed last night. He fell asleep with his candle lit, and the curtains got on fire. But fortunately he awoke before the bedclothes or the woodwork caught, and contrived to quench the flames with the water in the ewer. "A strange affair," I said in a low voice, then looking at her fixedly. "Did Mr. Rochester wake nobody? Did no one hear him move?" She again raised her eyes to me, and this time there was something of consciousness in her expression. She seemed to examine me warily, then she answered, "The servants sleep so far off, you know, miss." "Oh, thank you." I know it's kind of trembling a little bit, but that's just because I'm a little bit out of practice. I'm going for cozy mama vibes. Reading next to the fire, drinking some tea, which I do have some tea today. It's quite lovely. Hmm. The servants sleep so far off, you know, miss. They would not be likely to hear. Mrs. Fairfax's room and yours are the nearest to Master's, but Mrs. Fairfax said she heard nothing. When people get elderly, they often sleep heavy." She paused, then added, with a sort of assumed indifference, but still in a marked and significant tone, "But you are young, miss, and I should say a light sleeper. Perhaps you may have heard a noise." "I did," said I, dropping my voice so that Leah, who was still polishing the panes, could not hear me, "and at first I thought it was a Pilot, the dog. Pilot is a great dog. He's so cute. But Pilot cannot laugh, and I'm certain I heard a laugh, and a strange one." just, just being like, "I know you tried to kill him, sweetie, honey," without saying it outright. It's very funny. She took a new needleful of thread, waxed it carefully, threaded her needle with a steady hand, and then observed with perfect composure, "It is hardly likely Master would laugh, I should think, miss, when he is in such danger. You must have been dreaming." "I was not dreaming," I said with some warmth, for her brazen coolness provoked me. Again she looked at me, and with the same scrutinizing and conscious eye. "Have you told Master that you heard a laugh?" she inquired. "I have not had the opportunity of speaking to him this morning, so lying by omission. Lovely." Um, you did not think of opening your door and looking out into the gallery? She further asked. She appeared to be cross-questioning me, attempting to draw from me information unawares. The idea struck me that if she discovered I knew or suspected her guilt, she would be playing of she would be playing some he would she I can talk, I swear I can talk. She would be playing of some of her malignant pranks on me. I thought it advisable to be on my guard. On the contrary, said I bolted my door. Then you are not in the habit of bolting your door every night before you get into bed? Thank you. It only works, by the way, if the book is in public domain. If the book is not in public domain, then you are not allowed to read it because you are making media with the source. So we just have to be careful and we have to read only the classics. I actually just recently had a couple of books funded, and that was Carmilla and Dracula. And I believe I'm going to be reading Carmilla first. Hi, Mordecai. How are you doing? It's my reading day, so if you're not here for the cozy reading vibes, then I apologize. Mm. Taking a nice sip of tea while we wait for the ad to finish. At least it should be running, but it might not be because we all know everything is cursed. Fiend, she wants to know my habits that she may lay her plans accordingly. Indignation again prevailed over prudence. I replied sharply, hitherto I have often omitted to fasten the bolt. I did not think it necessary. I was not aware any danger or annoyance was to be dreaded at Thornfield Hall, but in future, and I laid marked stress on the words, I shall take good care to make all secure before I venture to lie down. It's like, bitch, you try to kill me, I will lock my door. I'll double lock my door. I'll triple lock my door. Oh, Haddock. Thank you so much. Pop in and say hi? Lovely, thank you so much. Yes, this is the reading outfit for the updated model. And we have a new main outfit I will also show, just really fast. This is the new main outfit. I love it so much. And then we're going to switch back because today is reading day. And we do get my reading outfit. It will be wise so to do, was her answer. This neighborhood is as quiet as any I know, and I never heard of the hall being attempted by robbers since it was a house. Though there are hundreds of pounds worth of plate in the plate closet, as is well known. And you see, for such a large house, there are very few servants, because master has never lived here much. And when he does come, being a bachelor, he needs little waiting on. But I always think it best to err on the safe side. A door is soon fastened, and it, it is as well to have a drawn bolt between one and any mischief that may be about. A deal of people, miss, are for trusting all to Providence, but I say Providence will not dispense with the means, though he often blesses them when they are used discreetly. And here she closed her harangue, a long one for her, and uttered with the demureness of a Quakeress. I still stood absolutely dumbfounded at what appeared to me her miraculous self-possession and most inscrutable hypocrisy, when the cook entered. Mrs. Poole, said she, addressing Grace, the servants' dinner will soon be ready. Will you come down? No, just put my pint of porter and a bit of pudding on a tray and I'll carry it upstairs. You'll have some meat? Just a morsel, and a taste of cheese, that's all. And the sago? Never mind it at present. I shall be coming down before tea time, so I'll make it myself. The cook here turned to me, saying that Mrs. Fairfax was waiting for me, so I departed. I hardly heard Mrs. Fairfax's account of the curtain conflagration during dinner. So much was I occupied in puzzling my brains over the enigmatical character of Grace Poole, and still more in pondering the problem of her position at Thornfield, and questioning why she had not been given into custody that morning, or, at the very least, dismissed from her master's service. He had almost as much as declared his conviction of her criminality last night. What mysterious cause withheld him from accusing her? Why had he enjoined me, too, to secrecy? It was strange. A bold, vindictive, and haughty gentleman seemed somehow in the power of one of the meanest of his dependents. So much in her power that even when she lifted her hand against his life, he dared not openly charge her with the attempt, much less punish her for it. Had Grace been young and handsome, I should have been tempted to think that tenderer feelings than prudence or fear influenced Mr. Rochester on her behalf. But, hard-favoured and matronly as she was, the idea could not be admitted. Yet, I reflected, she has been young once. Her youth would be contemporary with her master's. Mrs. Fairfax told me once. She had lived here many years. I don't think she can ever have been pretty, but for aught I know, she may possess originality and strength of character to compensate for the want of personal advantages. Mr. Rochester is an amateur of the decided and eccentric. Grace is eccentric at least. What of a former caprice? A freak very possible to a nature so sudden and headstrong as his, has delivered him into her power, and she now exercises over his actions a secret influence, and dare not disregard a secret influence, the result of his own indiscretion, which he cannot shake off and dare not disregard. But having reached this point of conjecture, Mrs. Poole's square, flat figure and uncomely, dry, even coarse face recurred so distinctly to my mind's eye that I thought, no, impossible. My supposition cannot be correct, yet, suggested the secret voice which talks to us in our own hearts. You are not beautiful either, and perhaps Mr. Rochester approves you. At any rate, you have often felt as if he did. And last night, remember his words, remember his look, remember his voice. Goodness. She's like, I'm not pretty, but he likes me. Maybe he likes this other woman, too. She tried to kill him. I'm so confused. I think a shenanigans is afoot. I well remembered all. Language, glance, and tone seemed at the moment vividly renewed. I was now in the schoolroom. Adele was drawing. I bent over her and directed her pencil. She looked up with a sort of start. "Qu'est-ce vous, mademoiselle?" said she. "Votre tremblant comme la feuille, et vos joues sont rouges, mais rouges comme des cressy." I am hot, Adele, with stooping. She went on sketching. I went on thinking. I hastened to drive from my mind the hateful notion I had been conceiving respecting Grace Poole. It disgusted me. I compared myself with her, and found we were different. Bessie Leaven had said I was quite a lady, and she spoke truth. I was a lady. and now I looked much better than I did when Bessie saw me. I had more color and more flesh, more life, more vivacity, because I had brighter hopes and keener enjoyments. "Evening approaches," said I, as I looked toward the window. "I have never heard Mr. Rochester's voice or step in the house today. But surely I shall see him before tonight. I feared the meeting in the morning, now I desire it, because expectation has been so long baffled that it has grown impatient." Impatient, impatient, how dare. When dusk actually closed, and when Adele left me to go and play in the nursery with Sophie. One second. Just have to make sure everything is organized in a moderately good way so that I can continue to read chat. There we go. And then I want to also be able to read if anyone tells me to drink some liquid. Let's see. When dusk actually closed, and when Adele left me to go and play in the nursery with Sophie, I did most keenly desire it. I listened for the bell to ring below. I listened for Leah coming up with a message. I fancied sometimes I heard Mr. Rochester's own tread, and I turned to the door, expecting it to open and admit him. The door remained shut. Darkness only came in through the window. Oh. Still, it was not late. He often sent for me at 7 and 8 o'clock, and it was yet but 6. Surely I should not be wholly disappointed tonight. If you're looking for accuracy in reading, I'm not the person to give it to you. I'm sorry. Let's see. Uh, Surely I should not be wholly disappointed tonight, when I had so many things to say to him. I wanted again to introduce the subject of Grace Poole, and to hear what he would answer. I wanted to ask him plainly if he really believed it was she who made last night's hideous attempt, and if so, why he kept her wickedness a secret. It little mattered whether my curiosity irritated him. I knew the pleasure of vexing and soothing him by turns. It was one I chiefly delighted in. It's like I quite enjoy annoying him, but also then making him feel better. My goodness. And a sure instinct always prevented me from going too far. Beyond the verge of provocation I never ventured. On the extreme brink I liked well to try my skill, retaining every minute form of respect, every propriety of my station. I could still meet him in argument without fear or uneasy restraint. This suited both him and me. That's adorable. I love it. A tread creaked on the stairs at last. Leah made her appearance, but it was only to intimate the idea that tea was ready in Mrs. Fairfax's room. Thither I repaired, glad at least to go downstairs, for that brought me, I imagined, nearer to Mr. Rochester's presence. Ads are messed up. I'm gonna take a quick sip of tea. "You must want your tea," said the good lady as I joined her. "You ate so little at dinner, I'm afraid," she continued. "You are not well today. You look flushed and feverish." Oh, quite well. I never felt better. Then you must prove it by evincing a good appetite. Will you fill the teapot while I knit off this needle? Having completed her task, she rose to draw down the blind, which she had hitherto kept up, by way, I suppose, of making the most of daylight, though dusk was now fast deepening into total obscurity. "It is fair tonight," said she, and she looked through the pane, as she looked through the panes. Though not starlight, Mr. Rochester has, on the whole, had a favourable day for his journey. Journey? Is Mr. Rochester gone anywhere? I did not know he was out. Oh, he set off the moment he had breakfasted. He has gone to the Leas, Mr. Eshton's place, 10 miles on the other side Millcote. I believe there is quite a party assembled there. Lord Ingram, Sir George Lynn, Colonel Dent, and others. Do you expect him back tonight? No, nor tomorrow either. I should think he is very likely to stay a week or more, within these fine, fashionable people. No, when these fine, fashionable people get together, they are so surrounded by elegance and gaiety, so well provided with all that can please and entertain, they are in no hurry to separate. Gentlemen especially are often in request on such occasions. And Mr. Rochester is so talented and so lively in society that I believe he is a general favourite. The ladies are very fond of him, though you would not think his appearance calculated to recommend him particularly in their eyes. But I suppose his acquirements and abilities, perhaps his wealth and good blood, make amends for any little fault of look. Are there ladies at the Leas? There are Mrs. Eshton and her 3 daughters, very elegant young ladies indeed. And there are the Honourable Blanche and Mary Ingram, most beautiful women, I suppose. Indeed, I have seen Blanche 6 or 7 years since, when she was a girl of 18. She came here to a Christmas ball and party Mr. Rochester gave. You should have seen the dining room that day, how richly it was decorated, how brilliantly lit up. I should think there were 50 ladies and gentlemen present, all of the first county families, and Miss Ingram was considered the belle of the evening. You saw her, you say, Mrs. Fairfax. What was she like? Yes, I saw her. The dining room doors were thrown open, and it was Christmas time. The servants were allowed to assemble in the hall to hear some of the ladies sing and play. Mr. Rochester would have me to come in, and I sat down in a quiet corner and watched them. I never saw a more splendid scene. The ladies were magnificently dressed, most of them, at least most of the younger ones, looked handsome, but Miss Ingram was certainly the queen. And what was she like? Tall, fine bust, sloping shoulders, long, graceful neck, olive complexion, dark and clear, noble features, eyes rather like Mr. Rochester's, large and black and as brilliant as her jewels. Hi, Foxy Fears. Yes, Purple Enjoyer did give plenty of subs, and I appreciate that a lot. I think my trackers are a little bit messed up. We'll figure that out soon. Was it? There we go. And then she had such a fine head of hair, raven black and so becomingly arranged, a crown of thick plaits behind, and in front the longest, the glossiest curls I ever saw. She was dressed in pure white. An amber-colored scarf was passed over her shoulder and across her breast, tied at the side, and descending in long fringes, ends below her knee. She wore an amber-colored flower, too, in her hair. It contrasted well with the jetty mass of her curls. She was greatly admired, of course. Yes, indeed, and not only for her beauty, but for her accomplishments. She was one of the ladies who sang. A gentleman accompanied her on the penny piano, and she and Mr. Rochester sang a duet. Mr. Rochester? I was not aware he could sing. Oh, he has a fine bass voice. Bass? Bass? I don't know. And an excellent taste for music. And Miss Ingram, what sort of voice had she? A very rich and powerful one. She sang delightfully. It was a treat to listen to her, and she played afterwards. I am no judge of music, but Mr. Rochester is, and I heard him say her execution was remarkably good. And this beautiful and accomplished lady, she is not yet married? It appears not. I fancy neither she nor her sister have very large fortunes. Old Lord Ingram's estates were chiefly entailed, and the eldest son came in for everything almost. Damn. But I wonder no wealthy nobleman or gentleman had taken a fancy to her. Mr. Rochester, for instance. He is rich, is he not? Oh, yes. But you see, there is a considerable difference in age. Mr. Rochester is nearly 40. She is but 25. In modern days, this is not that big of a. I mean, like, it's a little bit weird, but, like, in modern days, people do this all the time. It was a long time ago, though, so. What of that? More unequal matches are made every day. See, exactly. True, yet I should scarcely fancy Mr. Rochester would entertain an idea of the sort. But you eat nothing, and you have scarcely tasted it since you began tea. No, I am too thirsty to eat. Will you let me have another cup? I was about again to revert to the probability of a union between Mr. Rochester and the beautiful Blanche, but Adele came in, and the conversation was turned into another channel. Damn. When once more I reviewed the information I had got, looked into my heart, examined its thoughts and feelings, and endeavored to bring back with a strict hand such as had been straying through imagination's boundless and trackless waste into the safe fold of common sense. Arranged at my own bar, memory having given her evidence of the hopes, wishes, sentiments I had been cherishing since last night, of the general state of mind in which I had indulged for nearly a fortnight past, reason having come forward and told in her own quiet way a plain, unvarnished tale, showing how I had rejected the real and rapidly devoured the ideal, I pronounced judgment to this effect: that a greater fool than Jane Eyre had never breathed the breath of life, that a more fantastic idiot had never surfeited herself on sweet lies and swallowed poison as if it were nectar. She's like, I'm so stupid. I was just like assuming that he like dated this chick or like was married to her because I was all excited and worried and what am I doing with myself? Oh, Jane. You, I said, a favorite with Mr. Rochester. You, gifted with the power of pleasing him. You, of importance to him in any way. Go, your folly sickens me. And you have derived pleasure from occasional tokens of preference, equivocal tokens shown by a gentleman of family and a man of the world to a dependent and a novice. How dared you? Poor stupid dupe. Could not even self-interest make you wiser? You repeated to yourself this morning the brief scene of last night. Cover your face and be ashamed. He said something in praise of your eyes, did he? Blind puppy! Open their bleared lids and look on your own accursed senselessness. It does good to no woman to be flattered by her superior, who cannot possibly intend to marry her. And it is madness in all women to let a secret love kindle within them, which, if unreturned and unknown, must devour the life that feeds it, and, if discovered and responded to, must lead ignis fatuus, like into miry wilds, whence there is no extrication. Jane is a little bit dramatic. Damn. Listen then, Jane Eyre, to your sentence. Tomorrow, place the glass before you, and draw in chalk your own picture, faithfully. I know, right? Without softening one defect, omit no harsh line, smooth away no displeasing irregularity. Write under it, Portrait of a Governess, disconnected, poor, and plain. She is really just coming down on herself. Jesus Christ, Jane. Calm yourself. Calm. Take a breath, sweetie. Take a breath. She needs to chill. Afterwards, take a piece of smooth ivory. You have one prepared in your drawing box. Take your palette, mix your freshest, finest, clearest tints. Choose your most delicate camel hair pencils. Delineate carefully the loveliest face you can imagine. Paint it in your softest shades and sweetest lines, according to the description given by Mrs. Fairfax of Blanche Ingram. Remember the raven ringlets. What? You revert to Mr. Rochester as a model. Order, no snivel, no sentiment, no regret. I will endure only sense and resolution. Recall the august yet harmonious lineaments, the Grecan, like Greek, I'm guessing, neck and bust. Let the round and dazzling arm be visible, and the delicate hand. Omit neither diamond ring nor gold bracelet. Portray faithfully the attire, aerial lace and glistening satin, graceful scarf and golden rose. Call it Blanche, an accomplished lady of rank. Whenever in future you should chance to fancy Mr. Rochester thinks well of you, take out these two pictures and compare them. Say, Mr. Rochester might probably win the noble lady's love, if he chose to strive for it. It is likely he would waste a serious thought on this. Is it likely he would waste a serious thought on this indignant and insignificant plebeian? Jesus Christ, Jane! Jesus Christ! That is a good way to give yourself a healthy dose of depressions. Also, it's not a healthy dose. That is way too much depressions. Holy shit. That is taking comparing yourself to other people to a whole new level. Like a whole different level. I'll do it, I resolved. And having framed this determination, I grew calm and fell asleep. I kept my word. An hour or two sufficed to sketch my own portrait in crayons, and in less than a fortnight I had completed an ivory miniature of an imaginary Blanche Ingram. It looked a lovely face enough, and when compared to the real head in chalk, the contrast was as great as self-control could desire. I derived benefit from the task. It had kept my head and hands employed, and had given force and fixedness to the new impressions I wished to stamp indelibly on my heart. I really hope Mr. Rochester fucking sees this and sees the titles and smacks her. Like, bitch, you stop that. That's not how you fix that, by the way. I'm not saying he should actually do that, but, you know. I want to smack her. She's being so toxic to herself. She's like, you versus this noble lady. How dare you even assume that he would like you? when he could probably get this fucking hot piece of ass. I'm sorry. Ere long, I had reason to congratulate myself on the course of wholesome discipline to which I had thus forced my feelings to submit. Thanks to it, I was able to meet subsequent occurrences with a decent calm, which, had they found me unprepared, I should have probably been unequal to maintain, even externally. She's like, I'm upset. I'm really upset. Oh, sorry, my nails are being really stupid right now. I'm gonna trim one. Just like a little corner that's being a bit of a bitch. I did my best to make sure it was quiet. As quiet as possible. There we go. Chapter 17. A week passed and no news arrived of Mr. Rochester. 10 days, and still he did not come. Mrs. Fairfax said she should not be surprised if he were to go straight from the Lays to London, and thence to the Continent, and not show his face again at Thornfield for a year to come. He had not unfrequently quitted it in a manner quite as abrupt and unexpected. When I heard this, I was beginning to feel a strange chill and failing at the heart. I was actually permitting myself to experience a sickening sense of disappointment. But rallying my wits and recollecting my principles, I at once called my sensations to order. And it was wonderful how I got over the temporary blunder, how I cleared up the mistake of supposing Mr. Rochester's movements a matter in which I had any cause to take vital interest. Not that I humbled myself by a slavish notion, slavish, I think, slavish notion of inferiority. On the contrary, I just said, you have nothing to do with the master of Thornfield further than to receive the salary he gives you for teaching his protege, and to be grateful for such respectful and kind treatment as, if you do your duty, you have a right to expect at his hands. Be sure that is the only tie he seriously acknowledges between you and him. So don't make him the object of your fine feelings, your raptures, agonies, and so forth. He is not of your order. Keep to your caste, and be too self-respecting to lavish the love of the whole heart, soul, and strength, where such a gift is not wanted, and would be despised. She is making so many assumptions right now. What a bitch. I'm kidding. I went on with my day's business tranquility, but ever and anon vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield, and I kept involuntarily framing advertisements and pondering conjectures about new situations. These thoughts I did not think to check. They might germinate and bear fruit if they could. I mean, yeah, if you start thinking about doing a thing and then you just let yourself continue thinking about doing that thing, eventually you're going to probably be more likely to do that thing. I don't know. I don't know what this woman is on about. Mr. Rochester had been absent upwards of a fortnight when the post brought Mrs. Fairfax a letter. Thank you so much, Not, for the care package. Oh, I don't know if anyone heard that, but oh, that was Lily's neck. You come here for the book reading, you stay for satisfying neck pops. I'm doing well. I hope you're having a good day. We are on Chapter 17 of Jane Eyre. Jane is being very rude to herself. She literally spent a long time drawing herself and drawing someone that she assumed was like a romantic rival because she wanted to be like, no, it wouldn't even be a rivalry. She'd just win. And I feel a little called out, but that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes it's good to get called out. Mr. Rochester had been absent upwards of a fortnight when the post brought Mrs. Fairfax a letter. "It is from the master," said she, and she looked at the direction. "Now I suppose we shall know whether we are to expect his return or not." And while she broke the seal and perused the document, I went to taking my coffee. We were at breakfast. It was hot, and I attributed to that circumstance a fiery glow which suddenly rose to my face. Why my hand shook, and why I involuntarily spilt half the contents of my cup into my saucer, I did not choose to consider. She's like, I really like him. I really like him. Please come back. Well, I sometimes think we are too quiet, but we run a chance of being busy enough now, for a little while at least, said Mrs. Fairfax, still holding the note before her spectacles. Ere I permitted myself to request an explanation, I tied the string of Adele's pinafore, which happened to be loose, having helped her also to another bun and refilled her mug with milk. I said nonchalantly, Mr. Rochester is not likely to return soon, I suppose." "Indeed he is, in 3 days, he says. That will be next Thursday, and not alone either. I don't know how many of the fine people at the Leas are coming with him. He sends directions for all the best bedrooms to be prepared, and the library and drawing rooms are to be cleaned out. I am to get more kitchen hands from the George Inn at Millcote, and from wherever else I can, and the ladies will bring their maids and the gentlemen their valets, so we shall have a full house of it." And Mrs. Fairfax swallowed her breakfast and hastened away to commence operations. I feel bad for all of these people having to get prepared for such a crazy thing so quickly. 3 days. The 3 days were, as she had foretold, busy enough. I had thought all the rooms at Thornfield beautifully clean and well arranged, but it appears I was mistaken. 3 women were got to help, and such scrubbing, such brushing, such washing of paint and beating of carpets, such taking down and putting up of pictures, such polishing of mirrors and lustres, such lighting of fires in bedrooms, such airing of sheets and feather beds on hearths, I never beheld, either before or since. Adele ran quite wild in the midst of it. The preparations for company and the prospect of their arrival seemed to throw her into ecstasies. She would have Sophie to look over all her toilets, which toilets are just clean, clean. Anyway, as she called frocks, to furbish up any and all passes, and to air and arrange the new. For herself, she did nothing but caper about in the front chambers, jump on and off the bedsteads, and lie on the mattresses and piled up bolsters and pillows before the enormous fires roaring in the chimneys. From school duties she was exonerated. Mrs. Fairfax had pressed me into her service, and I was all day in the storeroom, helping or hindering her and the cook, learning to make custards and cheesecakes and French pastry, to truss game and garnish dessert dishes. Nice. Dessert dishes? Dessert. Which one is which? I can never remember. The party we were expected to arrive The party were expected to arrive on Thursday afternoon, in time for dinner at 6. During the interviewing period, I had no time to nurse chimeras, and I believe I was active and gay as anybody, Adele accepted. Still, now and then I received a damping check to my cheerfulness, and was, in spite of myself, thrown back on the region of doubts and portents, and dark conjectures. This was when I chanced to see the third-story staircase door, which of late had always been kept locked, open slowly, and give passage to the form of Grace Poole, in prim cap, white apron, and handkerchief. When I watched her glide along the gallery, her quiet tread muffled in a list slipper, when I saw her look into the bustling, topsy-turvy bedrooms, just say a word, perhaps, to the charwoman about the proper way to polish a grate, or clean a marble mantelpiece, or take stains from papered walls and then pass on. She would thus descend to the kitchen once a day, eat her dinner, smoke a moderate pipe on the hearth, and go back, carrying her pot of porter with her, for her private solace in her own gloomy upper haunt. Only 1 hour in the 24 did she pass with her fellow servants below. All the rest of her time was spent in some low-ceiled oaken chamber of the second story. There she sat and sewed, and probably laughed drearily to herself, as companionless as a prisoner in his dungeon. Damn. The strangest thing of all was that not a soul in the house except me noticed her habits, or seemed to marvel at them. No one discussed her position or employment. No one pitied her solitude or isolation. I once, indeed, overheard part of a dialogue between Leah and one of the charwomen, of which Grace formed the subject. Leah had been saying something I had not caught, and the charwoman remarked, "She gets good wages, I guess?" "Yes," said Leah. "I wish I had as good. Not that mine are to complain of. There's no stinginess at Thornfield, but they're not 1/5 of the sum Mrs. Poole receives, and she is laying by. She goes every quarter to the bank at Millcote. I should not wonder but she has saved enough to keep her independent if she'd like to leave. But I suppose she's got used to the place, and then she's not 40 yet, and strong and able for anything. It is too soon for her to give up business." "She is a good hand, I dare say," said the charwoman. "Ah, she understands what she has to do. Nobody better," rejoined Leah significantly. "And it is not everyone could fill her shoes, not for all the money she gets." "That it is not," was the reply. "I wonder whether the master," the charwoman was going on, but here Leah turned and perceived me, and she instantly gave her companion a nudge. "Doesn't she know?" I heard the woman whisper. Leah shook her head, and the conversation was of course dropped. All I had gathered from it amounted to this, that there was a mystery at Thornfield, and that from participation in what mystery I was purposely excluded. In that mystery, she's not allowed to be in the mystery, but we like mysteries. I want to know what the mystery is. Thursday came. All work had been completed the previous evening. Carpets were laid down, bed hangings festooned, radiant white counterpanes spread, toilet tables arranged, furniture rubbed, flowers piled in vases. Both chambers and saloons looked as fresh and bright as hands could make them. The hall, too, was scoured, and the great carved clock, as well as the steps and banisters of the staircase, were polished to the brightness of glass. In the dining room, the sideboard flashed resplendent with plate. In the drawing room and boudoir, vases of exotics bloomed on all sides. Sounds rad. Sounds like a wonderful decoration, huh? Afternoon arrived. Mrs. Fairfax assumed her best black satin gown, her gloves, and her gold watch, for it was her part to receive the company, to conduct the ladies to their rooms, etc. Adele, too, would be dressed, though I thought she had little chance of being introduced to the party that day at least. However, to please her, I allowed Sophie to apparel her in one of her short, full muslin frocks. For myself, I had no need to make any change. I should not be called upon to quit my sanctum of the schoolroom, for a sanctum it was now become to me, a very pleasant refuge in time of trouble. I don't understand. She seems like she's kind of blowing everything way out of proportion right now. She's like, I should just stay in my room. I don't want anyone to talk to me. But at the same time, she is just the teacher. She is just the governess of the house. I don't know if she's going to be properly introduced to anyone. It had been a mild, serene spring day, one of those days which, towards the end of March or the beginning of April, rise shining over the earth as heralds of summer. It was drawing to an end now, but the evening was even warm, and I sat at work in the schoolroom with the window open. "It gets late," said Mrs. Fairfax, entering in rustling state. "I am glad I ordered dinner an hour after the time Mr. Rochester mentioned, for it is past 6 now. I have sent John down to the gates to see if there's anything on the road. One can see a long way from thence in the direction of Millcote." She went to the window. "Here he is," said she. "Well, John," leaning out, "any news?" "They're comin', ma'am," was the answer. "They'll be here in 10 minutes. Oh, boy." Adele flew to the window. I followed, taking care to stand on one side, so that, screened by the curtain, I could see without being seen. The 10 minutes John had given seemed very long, but at last wheels were heard. 4 equestrians galloped up the drive, and after them came 2 open carriages. Fluttering veils and waving plumes filled the vehicles. 2 of the cavaliers were young, dashing-looking gentlemen. The third was Mr. Rochester on his black horse. Mesrour. Interesting name. Pilot bounding before him. At his side rode a lady, and he and she were the first of the party. Her purple riding habit almost swept the ground. Her veil streamed long on the breeze, mingling with its transparent folds and gleaming through them some rich raven ringlets. God, this is gonna do great for her jealousy. With its ring. "Miss Ingram!" exclaimed Mrs. Fairfax, and away she hurried to her post below. The cavalcade, following the sweep of the drive, quickly turned the angle of the house, and I lost sight of it. Adele now petitioned to go down, but I took her on my knee and gave her to understand that she must not on any account think of venturing in sight of the ladies, either now or at any other time, unless expressly sent for, that Mr. Rochester would be very angry, etc. Some natural tears she shed. On being told this, but as I began to look very grave, she consented at last to wipe them. A joyous stir was now audible in the hall. Gentlemen's deep tones and ladies' silvery accents blent harmoniously together, and distinguishable above all, though not loud, was the sonorous voice of the master of Thornfield Hall, welcoming his fair and gallant guests under its roof. Then light steps ascended the stairs, and there was a tripping through the gallery, and soft, cheerful laughs, and opening the closing doors, and for a time a hush. Elle changea de toilette, said Adele, who, listening attentively, had followed every movement, and she sighed. Chez maman, she said, quand il veille tout le monde. Je l'ai sauvé partout, à salon et à leur chambre. Souvent, j'ai regardé les femmes de chambre coiffées et habillées, les dames, et c'est laissé si amusant. Comme cela, on apprend. Oh my God. Don't you feel hungry, Adele? Mais oui, mademoiselle. Voilà 5 ou 6 choses que nous n'avons pas mangé. Bon. Why would they let her not eat for 6 hours? Why would they let her not eat for 6 hours? Well, now, while the ladies are in their rooms, I will venture down and get you something to eat. And, issuing from my asylum with precaution, I sought a back stairs which conducted directly to the kitchen. All in that region was fire and commotion. The soup and fish were in the last stage of projection, and the cook hung over her crucibles in a frame of mind and body threatening spontaneous combustion. In the servants' hall 2 coachmen and 3 gentlemen's gentlemen stood or sat around the fire. The Abigails, I suppose, were upstairs with their mistresses. The new servants that had been hired from Millcote were bustling about everywhere. Dreading this chaos, I at last reached the larder. There I took possession of a cold chicken, a roll of bread, some tarts, a plate or 2, and a knife and fork. With this booty I made a hasty retreat. I had regained the gallery, and was just shutting the back door behind me, when an accelerated hum warned me that the ladies were about to issue from their chambers. I could not proceed to the schoolroom without passing some of their doors, and running the risk of being surprised with my cargo of victuallage. So I stood still at this end, which, being windowless, was dark, quite dark now, for the sun was set and twilight gathering. Presently the chambers gave up their fair tenants one after another. Each came out gaily and airily, with dress that gleamed lustrous through the dusk. For a moment they stood grouped together at the other extremity of the gallery, conversing in a key of sweet, subdued vivacity. They then descended the staircase almost as noiselessly as a bright mist rolls down a hill. Their collective appearance had left on me an impression of high-born elegance, such as I had never before received. I found Adele peeping through the schoolroom door, which she held ajar. "What beautiful ladies!" cried she in English. "Oh, I wish I might go to them. Do you think Mr. Rochester will send for us by and by after dinner?" "No, indeed I don't. Mr. Rochester has something else to think about. Never mind the ladies tonight. Perhaps you will see them tomorrow. Here is your dinner." She was really hungry, obviously, after 6 hours of not eating. So the chicken and tarts served to divert her attention for a time. It was well I secured this forage, or both she and I and Sophie, to whom I conveyed a share of our repast, would have run a chance of getting no dinner at all. Everyone downstairs was much too engaged to think of us. Ah, the dessert was not carried out till after 9, and at 10 Footmen were still running to and fro with trays of coffee and cups. I allowed Adele to sit out much later than usual, for she declared she could not possibly go to sleep while the doors kept opening and shutting below, and people bustling about. Yeah, that's very fair, actually. I wouldn't be able to sleep with all that noise. Besides, she added, a message might possibly come from Mr. Rochester when she was undressed. Et alors, que demain? There we go. Oop, next page. I told her stories as long as she would listen to them, and then, for a change, I took her out into the gallery. The hall lamp was now lit, and it amused her to look over the balustrade, and watch the servants passing backwards and forwards. When the evening was far advanced, a sound of music issued from the drawing-room, whither the piano had been removed. Adele and I sat down on the top step of the stairs to listen. Presently a voice blent with the rich tones of the instrument. It was a lady who sang, and very sweet her notes were. The solo over, a duet followed, and then a glee, a joyous conversational murmur filled up the intervals. I listened long. Suddenly I discovered that my ear was wholly intent on analyzing the mingled sounds, and trying to discriminate amidst the confusion of accents those of Mr. Rochester. And when it caught them, which it soon did, it found a further task in framing the tones, rendered by distance inarticulate into words. The clock struck 11. I looked at Adele, whose head leant against my shoulder. Her eyes were waxing heavy, so I took her up in my arms and carried her off to bed. It was near 1 before the gentlemen and ladies sought their chambers. The next day was as fine as its predecessor. It was devoted by the party to an excursion to some site in the neighborhood. They set out early in the afternoon, some on horseback, the rest in carriages. I witnessed both the departure and the return. Miss Ingram, as before, was the only lady equestrian, and, as before, Mr. Rochester galloped at her side. The two rode a little apart from the rest. I pointed out this circumstance to Mrs. Fairfax, who was standing at the window with me. You said it was not likely they should think of being married, said I, but you see Mr. Rochester evidently prefers her to any of the other ladies. Yes, I dare say. No doubt he admires her. And she him, I added. Look how she leans her head towards him, as if she were conversing confidentially. I wish I could see her face. I never had a glimpse of it yet. You will see her this evening, answered Mrs. Fairfax. I happened to remark to Mr. Rochester how much Adele wished to be introduced to the ladies, and he said, "Oh, let her come into the drawing-room after dinner, and request Miss Eyre to accompany her." Ooh, that's not gonna go well. I'm so scared for Jane. I'm so scared for her because she's gonna get herself so stressed out. She's gonna be so concerned and she's going to suffer so much. Uh, she's gonna feel like everyone's judging her and staring at her. Even like she's gonna feel really ignored. There's no way to win this for Jane. Ugh. Yes, he said that from mere politeness. I need not go, I am sure, I answered. Well, I observed to him that as you were unused to company, I did not think you would like appearing before so gay a party, all strangers, and he replied in his quick way, "Nonsense. If she objects, tell her it is my particular wish, and if she resists, say I shall come and fetch her in case of in the case." He's like, "If you don't come, I'm gonna come get you." "I will not give him that trouble," I answered. "I'll go, if no better may be. But I don't like it. Shall you be there, Mrs. Fairfax?" No, I pleaded off, and he admitted my plea. I'll tell you how to manage so as to avoid the embarrassment of making a formal entrance, which is the most disagreeable part of the business. You must go into the drawing room while it is empty, before the ladies leave the dinner table. Choose your seat in any quiet nook you like. You need not stay long after the gentlemen come in, unless you please. Just let Mr. Rochester see you are there, and then slip away. Nobody will notice you. Oh no, famous last words. Nobody will notice you. Will these people remain long, do you think? Perhaps 2 or 3 weeks, certainly not more. After the Easter recess, Sir George Lynn, who was lately elected member for Millcote, uh, will have to go up to town and take his seat. I dare say Mr. Rochester will accompany him. It surprises me that he has already made so protracted a stay at Thornfield. It was with some trepidation that I perceived the hour approach when I was to repair with my charge to the drawing-room. Adele had been in a state of ecstasy all day, after hearing she was to be presented to the ladies in the evening, and it was not till Sophie commenced the operation of dressing her that she sobered down. Then the importance of the process quickly steadied her, and by the time she had her curls arranged in well-smoothed, drooping clusters, her pink satin frock put on, her long sash tied, and her lace mittens adjusted, she looked as grave as any judge. Poor Adele. No need to warn her not to disarrange her attire. When she was dressed, she sat demurely down in her little chair, taking care previously to lift up the satin skirt for fear she should crease it, and assured me she would not stir thence till I was ready. This I quickly was. My best dress, the silver grey one, purchased for Miss Temple's wedding, and never worn since, was soon put on. My hair was soon smoothed, my sole ornament, a pearl brooch, soon assumed. We descended. I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous. Hate this. Hate it. Fortunately, there was another entrance to the drawing room than that through the saloon where they were all seated at dinner. We found the apartment vacant, a large fire burning silently on the marbled hearth, and wax candles shining in bright solitude amid the exquisite flowers with which the tables were adorned. The crimson curtain hung before the arch. Slight as was the separation this drapery formed from the party in the adjoining saloon, they spoke in so low a key that nothing of their conversation could be distinguished beyond a soothing murmur. Adele, who appeared to be still under the influence of a most solemnizing impression, sat down without a word on the footstool I pointed out to her. I retired to a window seat, and taking a book from a table near, endeavored to read. Adele brought her stool to my feet. Ere long she touched my knee. What is it, Adele? Que... Est-ce que je ne puis pas prendre une seule de ces fleurs magnifiques, mademoiselle, seulement pour, le, pour compléter ma toilette. You think too much of your toilet, Adele, but you may have a flower. And I took a rose from a vase and fastened it in her sash. She sighed a sigh of ineffable satisfaction, as if her cup of happiness were now full. I turned my face away to conceal a smile I could not suppress. There was something ludicrous as well as painful in the little Parisian's earnest and innate devotion to matters of dress. I know she is adorable. I'm dreading this. I hate this. It's like a fucking nightmare. Okay. A soft sound of rising now became audible. The curtain was swept back from the arch, Through it appeared the dining room, with its lit luster pouring down light on the silver and glass of a magnificent dessert service. Covering a long table, a band of ladies stood in the opening. They entered, and the curtain fell behind them. There were but 8, yet somehow, as they flocked in, they gave the impression of a much larger number. Some of them were very tall, many were dressed in white, and all had a sweeping amplitude of array that seemed to magnify their persons as mist magnifies the moon. I rose and curtsied to them. 1 or 2 bent their heads in return. The others only stared at me. They dispersed about the room, reminding me, by the lightness and buoyancy of their movements, of a flock of white plumy birds. Some of them threw themselves in half-reclining positions on the sofas and ottomans. Some bent over the tables and examined the flowers and books. The rest gathered in a group round the fire. All talked in a low but clear tone which seemed habitual to them. I knew their names afterwards, and may as well mention them now. First, there was Mrs. Eshton and her 2 daughters. She had evidently been a handsome woman, and was well preserved still. Of her daughters, the eldest, Amy, was rather little, naive and childlike in face and manner, and piquant in form. Her white muslin dress and blue sash became her well. The second, Louisa, was taller and far more elegant in figure, with a very pretty face. Of that order, the French term minois chiffon. Both sisters were fair as lilies. Lilies, I love lilies. Lady Lynn was a large and stout personage of about 40, very erect, very haughty-looking, richly dressed in a satin robe of changeable sheen. Her dark hair shone glossily under the shade of an azure plume, and within the circlet of a band of gems. Mrs. Colonel Dent was less showy, but I thought more ladylike. She had a slight figure, a pale, gentle face, and fair hair. Her black satin dress, her scarf of rich foreign lace, and her pearl ornaments pleased me better than the rainbow radiance of the titled dame, as very fair. But the 3 most distinguished, partly, perhaps, because the tallest figures of the band were the Dowager Lady Ingram and her daughters, Blanche and Mary. They were all 3 of the loftiest stature of women. The dowager might be between 40 and 50. Her shape was still fine, her hair, by candlelight at least, still black. Her teeth, too, were still apparently perfect. Most people would have termed her a splendid woman of her age, and so she was, no doubt, physically speaking. But then there was an expression of almost unsupportable haughtiness in her bearing and countenance. She had Roman features and a double chin, disappearing into a throat like a pillar. These features appeared to me not only inflated and darkened, but even furrowed with pride. And the chin was sustained by the same principle. In a position of almost preternatural erectness, she had likewise a fierce and hard eye. It reminded me of Mrs. Reed's. She mouthed her words in speaking. Her voice was deep, its inflections very pompous, very dogmatical, very intolerable, in short. A crimson velvet robe and a shawl turban of some gold-wrought Indian fabric invested her, I suppose she thought, with a truly imperial dignity. Blanche and Mary were of equal stature, straight and tall as poplars. Mary was too slim for her height, but Blanche was molded like a Dian. I regarded her, of course, with special interest. First, I wished to see whether her appearance accorded with Mrs. Fairfax's description. Secondly, whether it at all resembled the fancy miniature I had painted of her. And thirdly, it will out. Whether it were such as I should fancy likely to suit Mr. Rochester's taste. Goodness gracious. As far as person went, she answered point for point, both to my picture and Mrs. Fairfax's description. The noble bust, the sloping shoulders, the graceful neck, the dark eyes and black ringlets were all there, but her face was like her mother's, a youthful, unfurrowed likeness. The same low brow, the same high features, the same pride. It was not, however, so saturnine a pride. She laughed continually. Her laugh was satirical, and so was the habitual expression of her arched and haughty lip. Genius is said to be self-conscious. I cannot tell whether Miss Ingram was a genius, but she was self-conscious, remarkably self-conscious indeed. She entered into a discourse on botany with the gentle Mrs. Dent. It seemed Mrs. Dent had not studied that science, though. As she said, she liked flowers, especially wild ones. Miss Ingram had, and she ran over its vocabulary with an air. I presently perceived she was, what is vernacularly termed, trailing Mrs. Dent, that is, playing on her ignorance. Her trail might be clever, but it was decidedly not good-natured. She played. Her execution was brilliant. She sang. Her voice was fine. She talked French apart to her mamma, and she talked it well, with fluency and with a good accent. Mary had a milder and more open countenance than Blanche. Softer features, too, and a skin some shades fairer. Miss Ingram was dark as a Spaniard. Interesting way to put it, Jane. But Mary was deficient in life. Her face lacked expression, her eye luster, she had nothing to say. And, having once taken her seat, remained fixed like a statue in its niche. The sisters were both attired in spotless white. And did I now think Miss Ingram such a choice as Mr. Rochester would be likely to make? I could not tell. I did not know his taste in female beauty. If he liked the majestic, she was the very type of majesty. Then she was accomplished, sprightly. Then she was accomplished and sprightly. Most gentlemen would admire her, I thought, and that he did admire her I already seemed to have obtained proof. To remove the last shade of doubt, it remained but to see them together. You are not to suppose, reader, that Adele has all this time been sitting motionless on the stool at my feet. No. When the ladies entered, she rose, advanced to meet them, made a stately reverence, and said with gravity, Bonjour, mesdames. Oh. And Miss Ingram had looked down at her with a mocking air and exclaimed, Oh, what a little puppet. Oh, you fucking bitch. Anyway, Lady Lynn had remarked, Is it Mr. Rochester's ward, I suppose? The little French girl he was speaking of. Mrs. Dent had kindly taken her hand and given her a kiss. Amy and Louisa Eshton had cried out simultaneously, What a love of a child! And then they had called her to a sofa, where she now sat ensconced between them, chatting alternately in French and broken English, absorbing not only the young lady's attention, but that of Mrs. Eshton and Lady Lynn, and getting spoilt to her heart's content. At last coffee is brought in, and the gentlemen are summoned. I sit in the shade, if any shade there be in this brilliantly lit apartment. The window curtain half hides me. Again the arch yawns. They come. The collective appearance of the gentlemen, like that of the ladies, is very imposing. They are all consumed in black. Most of them are tall, some young. Henry and Frederick Lynn are very dashing sparks indeed, and Colonel Dent is a fine soldierly man. Mr. Eshton, the magistrate of the district, is gentlemanlike, his hair quite white, his eyebrows and whiskers still dark. which gives him something of the appearance of a Père Noble de Theatre. Lord Ingram, like his sisters, is very tall. Like them, also, he is handsome, but he shares Mary's apathetic and listless look. He seems to have more length of limb than vivacity of blood or vigor of brain. What? And where is Mr. Rochester? He comes in last. I am not looking at the arch, yet I see him enter. I try to concentrate my attention on those netting needles, on the meshes of the purse I am forming. I wish to think only of the work I have in my hands, to see only the silver beads and silk threads that lie in my lap, whereas I distinctly behold his figure, and I inevitably recall the moment when I last saw it, just after I had rendered him what he deemed an essential service, and he, holding my hand and looking down on my face, surveyed me with eyes that revealed a heart full and eager to overflow, in whose emotions I had a part. Oh, how near had I approached him at that moment? What had occurred since calculated to change his mind, his and my relative positions? What had occurred since calculated to change his and my relative positions? Yet now how distant, how far estranged we were, so far estranged that I did not expect him to come and speak to me. I did not wonder when, without looking at me, he took a seat at the other side of the room and began conversing with some of the ladies. Ah, no sooner did I see that his attention was riveted on them, and that I might gaze without being observed, than my eyes were drawn involuntarily to his face. I could not keep their lids under control. They would rise, and the irids would fix on him. I looked, and had acute pleasure in looking, a precious, yes, yet poignant pleasure, pure gold, with a steely point of agony. A pleasure like what the thirst-perishing man might feel who knows the well to which he has crept is poisoned, yet stoops and drinks divine draughts nevertheless. Ugh, harsh, oh, that's harsh. Most true is that beauty is in the eye of the gazer. My master's colorless olive face, square, massive brow, broad and jetty eyebrows, deep eyes, strong features, firm, grim mouth, all energy, decision, will, were not beautiful according to rule, but they were more than beautiful to me. They were full of an interest, an influence that quite mastered me, and took my feelings from my own power and fettered them in his. I had not intended to love him. The reader knows I had wrought hard to extirpate from my soul the germs of love there detected. Mm. And now, at the first renewed view of him, they spontaneously arrived, green and strong. He made me love him without looking at me. Oh no, poor Jane! I compared him with his guests. What was the gallant grace of the Lynns, the languid elegance of Lord Ingram, even the military distinction of Colonel Dent, contrasted with his look of native pith and genuine power? I had no sympathy in their appearance, their expression, yet I could imagine that most observers would call them attractive, handsome, imposing, while they would pronounce Mr. Rochester at once harsh-featured and melancholy-looking, though he sounds hot. Damn it. I saw them smile, laugh. It was nothing. The light of the candles had as much soul in it as their smile, the tinkle of the bell as much significance as their laugh. I saw Mr. Rochester smile. His stern features softened. His eye grew brilliant and gentle, its ray both searching and sweet. He was talking, at the moment, to Louisa and Amy Eshton. I wondered to see them receive the calm that look. I wondered to see them receive with calm that look which seemed to me so penetrating. I expected their eyes to fall, their color to rise under it. Yet I was glad when I found they were in no sense moved. He is not to them what he is to me, I thought. He is not of their kind. I believe he is of mine. I am sure he is. I feel akin to him. I understand the language of his countenance and movements. Though rank and wealth sever us widely, I have something in my brain and heart, in my blood and nerves, that assimilates me mentally to him. Did I say a few days since that I had nothing to do with him but to receive my salary at his hands? Did I forbid myself to think of him in any other light than as a paymaster? Blasphemy against nature. Every good, true, vigorous feeling I have gathers impulsively around him. I know I must conceal my sentiments. I must smother hope. I must remember that he cannot care much for me. For when I say that I am of his kind, I do not mean that I have his force of influence, and his spell to attract. I mean only that I have certain tastes and feelings in common with him. I must, then, repeat continually that we are forever sundered, and yet, while I breathe and think, I must love him. Ah, man. Jane, sweetie. Coffee is handed. The ladies, since the gentlemen entered, have become lively as larks. Conversation waxes brisk and merry. Colonel Dent and Mr. Eshton argue on politics. Their wives listen. The two proud dowagers, Lady Lynn and Lady Ingram, confabulate together. Sir George, whom, by the by, I have forgotten to describe, a very big, a very fresh-looking country gentleman, stands before their sofa, coffee cup in hand, and occasionally puts in a word. Mr. Frederick Lynn has taken a seat beside Mary Ingram, and is showing her the engravings of a splendid volume. She looks, smiles now and then, but apparently says little. The tall and phlegmatic Lord Ingram leans with folded arms on the chair of the little and lively Amy Eshton. She glances up at him, and chatters like a wren. She likes him better than she does Mr. Rochester. Henry Lynn has taken possession of an ottoman at the feet of Louisa. Adele shares it with him. He is trying to talk French with her, and Louisa laughs at his blunders. With whom will Blanche Ingram pair? She is standing alone at the table, bending gracefully over an album. She seems waiting to be sought, but she will not wait too long. She herself selects a mate. Mr. Rochester, having quitted the Ashtons, stands on the hearth, as solitary as she stands by the table. She confronts him, taking her station on the opposite side of the mantelpiece. Mr. Rochester, I thought you were not fond of children. Nor am I. Then what induced you to take charge of such a little doll as that? Pointing to Adele. Where did you pick her up? I did not pick her up. She was left in my hands. You should have sent her to school. I could not afford it. Schools are so dear. Why, I suppose you have a governess for her. I saw a person with her just now. Is she gone? Oh, no, there she is, still. Behind the window curtain. You pay her, of course. I should think it quite as expensive. More so. For you have them both to keep in addition. I feared, or should I say hoped, the allusion to me would make Mr. Rochester glance my way, and I involuntarily shrank farther into the shade, but he never turned his eyes. I have not considered the subject, he said indifferently, looking straight before him. No, you men never do consider economy and common sense. You should hear mamma on the chapter of governesses. Mary and I have had, I should think, a dozen at least in our day, half of them detestable, and the rest ridiculous, and all the incubi, were they not, mamma? And all incubi, were they not? Did you speak, my own? The young lady, thus claimed as the dowager's special property, reiterated her question with an explanation. My dearest, don't mention governesses. The word makes me nervous. I have suffered a martyrdom from their incompetency and caprice. 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 I thank heaven I have now done with them. Mrs. Dent bent over to the pious lady and whispered something in her ear. I suppose, from the answer elicited, it was a reminder that one of the anathematized race was present. Tant pis, said her ladyship. I hope it may do her good. Then, in a lower tone, but still loud enough for me to hear, I noticed her. I am a judge of physiognomy, and in hers I see all the faults of her class. What are they, madam? Inquired Mr. Rochester aloud. I will tell you in your private ear, replied she, wagging her turban 3 times with portentous significancy. But my curiosity will be past its appetite. It craves food now. Ask Blanche. She is nearer you than I. Oh, don't refer him to me, mamma. I have just one word to say of the whole tribe. They are a nuisance. Not that I ever suffered much from them. I took care to turn the tables. What tricks Theodore and I used to play on our Miss Wilsons, and Mr. Grays, and Madame Joubert. Mary was always too sleepy to join in a plot with spirit. The best fun was with Madame Joubert. Miss Wilson was a poor sickly thing, lachrymose and low-spirited, not worth the trouble of vanquishing, in short. And Mrs. Gray was coarse and insensible. No blow took effect on her, but poor Madame Joubert. I see her yet in her raging passions, when we had driven her to extremities, spilt our tea, crumbled our bread and butter, tossed our books up to the ceiling, and played charivari with the ruler and desk. Yeesh. The fender and fire irons. Theodore, do you remember those merry days? God, these these kids sound horrible. I would I would want to smack these kids. I don't smack kids, but holy shit, I hate them. Yes, to be sure I do, drawled Lord Ingram, and the poor old stick used to cry out, "Oh, you villain child, you villain's childs." And then we sermonized her on the presumption of attempting to teach such clever blades as we were, when she was herself so ignorant. Oh my god, they're so cocky. Fuck these guys. We did, and Tito, you know, I helped you in prosecuting or persecuting your tutor. Jane, Jane internally, it was persecuting. Your tutor, way-faced Mr. Vining, the parson in the pip, as we used to call him. He and Miss Wilson took the liberty of falling in love with each other. At least Tito and I thought so. We surprised sundry tender glances and sighs as we we surprised sundry tender glances and sighs, which we interpreted as tokens of la belle passion. And I promise you, the public soon had the benefit of our discovery. We employed it as a sort of lever to hoist our dead weights from the house. Dear mamma, there, as soon as she got an inkling of the business, found out that it was of an immoral tendency. Did you not, Lady Mother? Certainly, my best. And I was quite right. Depend on that. There are 1,000 reasons why liaisons between governesses and tutors should never be tolerated a moment in any well-regulated house. Firstly, oh my God. Oh, gracious mamma, spare us the enumeration. Arrest. We all know them. Danger of bad example, of innocence of childhood, distractions and consequent neglect of duty on the part of the attached, mutual alliance and reliance, confidence thence resulting, insolence accompanying, mutiny, and then general blow-up. Am I right, Baroness Ingram of Ingram Park? My lily flower, you are right now, as always. I fucking hate these people. And then no more need be said. Change the subject. Amy Eshton, not hearing or heeding this dictum, joined in with her soft infantine tone. Louisa and I used to quiz our governess too, but she was such a good creature. She would bear anything. Nothing put her out. Was she never cross with us? She was never cross with us, was she, Louisa? No, never. We might do what we pleased. Ransack her desk and her work-box, and turn her drawers inside out, and she was so good-natured she would give us anything we asked for. I suppose now, said Miss Ingram, curling her lip sarcastically, we shall have an abstract of the memories of all the governesses extant, in order to avert such visitation. I again move the introduction of a new topic. Mr. Rochester, do you second my motion? Madam, I support you on this point, as on every other. Then on me be the onus of bringing it forward. Signor Eduardo, are you in voice tonight? Donna Bianca, if you command it, I will be. Then, signor, I lay on you my sovereign behest to furbish up your lungs and other vocal organs, as they will be wanted on my royal service. Who would not be the Rizzio of so divine a Mary? A fig for Rizzio. I don't understand what that means. Cried she, tossing her head with all its curls as she moved to the piano. It is my opinion the fiddler David must have been an insipid sort of fellow. I like Black Bothwell better. To my mind, a man is nothing without a spice of the devil in him. And history may say what it will of James Hepburn, but I have a notion he was just the sort of wild, fierce bandit hero whom I could have consented to gift with my hand. Gentlemen, you hear? Now, which of you most resembles Bothwell? Cried Mr. Rochester. I like that he didn't, I don't know, didn't make a scene of it, but oh my god, fuck these people. I should say the preference lies with you, responded Colonel Dent. On my honor, I am much obliged to you, was the reply. Miss Ingram, who had now seated herself with proud grace at the piano, spreading out her snowy robes in queenly amplitude, commenced a brilliant prelude, talking meantime. She appeared to be on her high horse tonight. Both her words and her air seemed intended to excite not only the admiration, but the amazement of her auditors. She was evidently bent on striking them as something very dashing and daring indeed. "Oh, I am so sick of the young men of the present day," exclaimed she, rattling away at the instrument. "Poor puny things not fit to stir a step beyond Papa's park gates, nor to go even so far without Mamma's permission and guardianship. Creatures so absorbed in care about their pretty faces, and their white hands, and their small feet. What? As if a man had anything to do with beauty. As if loveliness were not the special prerogative of women, her legitimate appendage and heritage. I grant an ugly woman is a blot on the fair face of creation, but as to the gentlemen, let them be solicitous to possess only strength and valor. Let their motto be, hunt, shoot, and fight. The rest is not worth a fillip. Such should be my device, were I a man. Whenever I marry," she continued, after a pause which none interrupted, "I am resolved my husband shall not be a rival, but a foil to me. I will suffer no competitor near the throne. I shall exact an undivided homage. His devotions shall not be shared between me and the shape he sees in his mirror. Mr. Rochester, now sing, and I will play for you." "I'm all obedience," was the response. Here, then, is a corsair song. Know that I dote on corsairs, and for that reason sing it con spirito. Commands from Miss Ingram's lips would put spirit into a mug of milk and water. Take care, then. If you don't please me, I will shame you by showing how such things should be done. That is offering a premium on incapacity. I shall now endeavor to fail. Gardez-vous et bien. If you err wilfully, I shall devise a proportionate punishment. Miss Ingram ought to be clement, for she is in her power to inflict a chastisement beyond mortal endurance. Ha! Explain, commanded the lady. Pardon me, madam, no need of explanations. Your own fine sense must inform you that one of your frowns would be a sufficient substitute for capital punishment. Sing, said she, and again touching the piano, she commenced an accompaniment in spirited style. Now is my time to slip away, thought I, but the tones that then severed the air arrested me. Mrs. Fairfax had said Mr. Rochester possessed a fine voice. He did, a mellow, powerful bass, into which he threw his own feeling, his own force, finding a way through the ear to the heart, and there waking sensation strangely. I waited till the last deep and full vibration had expired, till the tide of talk, checked an instant, had resumed its flow. Then I quitted my sheltered corner and made my exit by the side door, which was fortunately near. Thence a narrow passage led into the hall. In crossing it, I perceived my sandal was loose. I stopped to tie it, kneeling down for that purpose on the mat at the foot of the staircase. I heard the dining-room door unclose. A gentleman came out, rising hastily. I stood face to face with him. It was Mr. Rochester. Oh, boy. How do you do? He asked. I'm very well, sir. Why did you not come and speak to me in the room? I thought I might have restored the question on him who put it, but I would not take that freedom. I answered, I did not wish to disturb you, as you seemed engaged, sir. What have you been doing during my absence? Nothing in particular. Teaching Adele as usual. And getting a good deal paler than you were, as I saw at first sight. What is the matter? Nothing at all, sir. Did you take any cold that night? You half drowned me. Not the least. Return to the drawing-room. You are deserting too early. I'm tired, sir. He looked at me for a minute. And a little depressed, he said. What about? Tell me. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Okay. Nothing, sir. I am not depressed. But I affirm that you are so much depressed that a few more words would bring tears to your eyes. Indeed, they are there now, shining and swimming, and a bead has slipped from the lash and fallen onto the flag. If I had time, and was not in mortal dread of some prating prig of a servant passing, I would know what all this means. Well, tonight I excuse you, but understand that so long as my visitors stay, I expect you to appear in the drawing-room every evening. It is my wish. Don't neglect it. Now go, and send Sophie for Adele. Good night, my... He stopped, biting his lip, and abruptly left me. What? Sorry, that got really loud. What? What? What did he just say? What words did he... How could he say such a thing? How... Ending the sentence with nothing. Ending the... That's not fair. That is not fair at all. I'm sorry, I just... What was he about to say? What was he about to say? Okay, on that note, I'm going to be right back. I need to refill my tea and recover from that little interaction. I'll be right back. It won't take too long, I promise. I'm just a little bug! Ah! Bug! Bug! You whore! You whore! Radiance! How could you do this to me? Radiance! Radiance, please! Fucking Radiance! Okay. Okay, well that's it. Fucking hornet. Fucking sorry, babe. Sorry, sister. Sorry, my dearest sister. Whoopsies. That's my bad. I thought, okay, so here's the thing about that. The thing about. What is that? Hello? Okay, it's nothing. Gotcha. You dead. You dead, bitch. Okay, but like, are we sure this is nothing? Like, are we like really absolutely sure this is nothing? Okay. I guess. Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm back. Thank you for waiting if you did wait. What the hell? I am like sweating after that. That's it. It was a whole thing, and he was talking to her. How dare? Oh my goodness. Okay. Oh. Merry days were these at Thornfield Hall, and busy days too. How different from the first 3 months of stillness, monotony, and solitude I had passed beneath its roof. All sad feelings seemed now driven from the house, all gloomy associations forgotten. There was life everywhere. Movement all day long. You could not now traverse the gallery, once so hushed, nor enter the front chambers, once so tenantless, without encountering a smart lady's maid or a dandy valet. The kitchen, the butler's pantry, the servants' hall, the entrance hall, were equally alive. And the saloons were only left void and still when the blue sky and halcyon sunshine of the genial spring weather called their occupants out into the grounds. Even when that weather was broken and continuous rain set in for some days, no damp seemed cast over enjoyment. Indoor amusements only became more lively and varied, in consequence of the stop put to outdoor gaiety. I wondered what they were going to do the first evening a change of entertainment was proposed. They spoke of playing charades, but in my ignorance I did not understand the term. The servants were called in, the dining-room tables wheeled away, the lights otherwise disposed, the chairs placed in a semicircle opposite the arch. While Mr. Rochester and the other gentlemen directed these altercations, the ladies were running up and down stairs, ringing for their maids. Mrs. Fairfax was summoned to give information respecting the resources of the house in shawls. Thank you so much for the lurk. This book is wild. Dresses, draperies of any kind, and certain wardrobes of the third story were ransacked, and their contents, in the shape of brocaded and hooped petticoats, satin saquettes, black modes, lace lappets, etc., were brought down in armfuls by the Abigails, and then a selection was made, and such things as were chosen were carried to the boudoir within the drawing-room. I really hope they didn't find her drawing. I really hope they didn't find her art. My God, I would die. Meantime, Mr. Rochester had again summoned the ladies round him, and was selecting certain of their number to be of his party. Miss Ingram is mine, of course, said he. Afterwards he named the two Misses Eshton and Mrs. Dent. Just Mrs. Dent. He looked at me. I happened to be near him, as I had been fastening the clasp of Mrs. Dent's bracelet, which had got loose. "Will you play?" he asked. I shook my head. He did not insist, which I rather feared he would have done. He allowed me to return quietly to my usual seat. He and his aides now withdrew behind the curtain. The other party, which was headed by Colonel Dent, sat down on the crescent of chairs. One of the gentlemen, Mr. Eshton, observing me, seemed to propose that I should be asked to join them, but Lady Ingram instantly negatived the notion. No, I heard her say. She looks too stupid for any game of the sort. Oh my. I want to punch Miss Ingram in the face. Okay, let's go. I'm going to throw a fucking glove at her, the ground in front of her. Bitch. Anyway, ere long a bell tinkled, and the curtain drew up. Within the arch, the bulky figure of Sir George Lynn, whom Mr. Rochester had likewise chosen, was seen enveloped in a white sheet. Before him, on a table, lay open a large book, and at his side stood Amy Eshton, draped in Mr. Rochester's cloak, and holding a book in her hand. Somebody unseen rang the bell merrily. Then Adele, who had insisted on being one of her guardian's party, bounded forward, scattering round her the contents of a basket of flowers she carried on her arm. Then appeared the magnificent figure of Miss Ingram, clad in white, a long veil on her head, and a wreath of roses round her brow. By her side walked Mr. Rochester, and together they drew near the table. They knelt, while Mrs. Dent and Louisa Eshton, dressed also in white, took up their stations behind them. A ceremony followed, in dumb show, in which it was easy to recognize the pantomime of a marriage. At its termination, Colonel Dent and his party consulted in whispers for 2 minutes. Then the colonel called out, "Bride!" Mr. Rochester bowed, and the curtain fell. A considerable interval elapsed before it again rose. Its second rising displayed a more elaborately prepared scene than the last. The drawing-room, as I have before observed, was raised 2 steps above the dining-room, and on the top of the upper step, placed a yard or two back within the room, appeared a large marble basin, which I recognized as an ornament of the conservatory, where it usually stood, surrounded by exotics and tenanted by goldfish, and whence it must have been transported with some trouble on account of its size and weight. Seated on the carpet, by the side of this basin, was seen Mr. Rochester, consumed in shawls, with a turban on his head. His dark eyes and swarthy skin and Paynim features suited the costume exactly. He looked the very model of an Eastern emir, an agent or a victim of the bowstring. Presently advanced into view Miss Ingram. She, too, was attired uh, in a foreign fashion. A crimson scarf tied sash-like round the waist, an embroidered handkerchief knotted about her temples, her beautifully molded arms bare, one of them upraised in the act of supporting a pitcher, poised gracefully on her head. Both her cast of form and feature, her complexion and her general air, suggested the idea of some princess of the patriarchal days, and such was doubtless the character she intended to represent. She approached the basin and bent over it as if to fill her pitcher. She again lifted it to her head. The personage on the well brink now seemed to accost her, to make some request. She hasted the bosom of his robe. He then produced a no, she hasted, let down her pitcher on her hand, and gave him to drink. From the bosom of his robe he then produced a casket, opened it, and showed magnificent bracelets and earrings. She acted astonishment and admiration. Kneeling, he laid the treasure at her feet. Incredulity and delight were expressed by her looks and gestures. The stranger fastened the bracelets on her arms and the rings in her ears. It was Eleazar and Rebecca. The camels only were wanting. Nice. The divining party again laid their heads together. Apparently they could not agree about the word or syllable the scene illustrated. Colonel Dent, their spokesman, demanded the tableau of the whole, whereupon the curtain again descended. On its third rising, only a portion of the drawing room was disclosed, the rest being concealed by a screen, hung with some sort of dark and coarse drapery. The marble basin was removed. In its place stood a deal table and a kitchen chair. These objects were visible by a very dim light proceeding from a horn lantern, the wax candles being all extinguished. Amidst this sordid scene sat a man with his clenched hands resting on his knees, and his eyes bent on the ground. I knew Mr. Rochester, though the begrimed face, the disordered dress, his coat hanging loose from one arm, as if it had been almost torn from his back in a scuffle, the desperate and scowling countenance, the rough bristling hair, might well have disguised him. As he moved, a chain clanked. To his wrists were attached fetters. "Bridewell!" exclaimed Colonel Dent, and the charade was solved. A sufficient interval having elapsed for the performers to resume their ordinary costume, they re-entered the dining room. Mr. Rochester led in Miss Ingram. She was complimenting him on his acting. "Do you know," said she, "that of the 3 characters I liked you in the last the best? Oh, had you but lived a few years earlier, what a gallant gentleman highwayman you would have made." "Is all the soot washed from my face?" he asked, turning towards her. "Alas, yes. There's more. The more's the pity. Nothing could be more becoming to your complexion than a ruffian's rouge." "You would like a hero of the road, then?" "An English hero of the road would be the next best thing to an Italian bandit, and that could only be surpassed by a Levantine pirate." "Well, whatever I am, remember you are my wife. We were married an hour since, in the presence of all these witnesses." She giggled, and her color rose. Ugh, I hate her. "Now, Dent," continued Mr. Rochester, "it is your turn." And the other party withdrew. He and his band took the vacated seats. Miss Ingram placed herself at her leader's right hand. The other diviners filled the chairs on either side of him and her. I did not now watch the actors. I no longer waited with interest for the curtain to rise. My attention was absorbed by the spectators. My eyes, erewhile fixed on the arch, were now irresistibly attracted to the semicircle of chairs. What charade Colonel Dent and his party played, what word they chose, and how they acquitted themselves, I no longer remember. But I still see the consultation which followed each scene. I see Mr. Rochester turn to Miss Ingram, and Miss Ingram turn to him. I see her incline her head towards him, till the jetty curls almost touch his shoulder and wave against his cheek. I hear their mutual whisperings, I recall their interchanged glances, and something even of the feeling roused by the spectacle returns in memory at this moment. I have told you, reader, that I had learned to love Mr. Rochester. I could not unlove him now, merely because I found that he had ceased to notice me, because I might pass hours in his presence, and he would never once turn his eyes in my direction, because I saw all his attentions appropriated by a great lady, uh, who scorned to touch me with the hem of her robes as she passed, who, if ever her dark and imperious eye fell on me by chance, would withdraw it instantly, as from an object too mean to merit observation. I could not unlove him, because I felt sure he would soon marry this very lady, because I read daily in her a proud because I read daily in her a proud security in his intentions respecting her, because I witnessed hourly in him a style of courtship which, if careless and choosing rather to be sought than to seek, was yet, in its very carelessness, captivating, and in its very pride, irresistible. Ah, Jane. There was nothing to cool or banish love in these circumstances, though much to create despair, much too, you will think, reader, to engender jealousy. if a woman in my position could presume to be jealous of a woman in Miss Ingram's. But I was not jealous, or very rarely. The nature of the pain I suffered could not be explained by that word. Miss Ingram was a mark beneath jealousy. She was too inferior to excite the feeling. Pardon the seeming paradox. I mean what I say. She was very showy, but she was not genuine. She had a fine purse and brilliant attainments, but her mind was poor, her heart barren by nature. Nothing bloomed spontaneously on that soil. No unforced natural fruit delighted by its freshness. She was not good, she was not original. She used to repeat sounding phrases from books. She never offered nor had an opinion of her own. She advocated a high tone of sentiment, but she did not know the sensations of sympathy and pity. Tenderness and truth were not in her. Damn. She's like, she's a bitch. Too often she betrayed this by the undue vent she gave to a spiteful antipathy she had conceived against little Adele, pushing her away with some contemptuous epithet if she happened to approach her, sometimes ordering her from the room, and always treating her with coldness and acrimony. Other eyes besides mine watched these manifestations of character, watched them closely, keenly, shrewdly. Yes, the future bridegroom, Mr. Rochester himself, exercised over his intended a ceaseless surveillance, and it was from this sagacity, this guardedness of his, this perfect, clear consciousness of his fair one's defects, this obvious absence of passion in his sentiments towards her, that my ever-torturing pain arose. It's like he seems like he's kind of stuck with her somehow. I saw he was going to marry her for family, perhaps political reasons, because her rank and connections suited him. I felt he had not given her his love, and that her qualifications were ill adapted to win from him that treasure. This was the point. This was where the nerve was touched and teased. This was where the fever was sustained and fed. She could not charm him. If she had managed the victory at once, and he had yielded and sincerely laid his heart at her feet, I should have covered my face, turned to the wall, and, figuratively, died to them. Damn. If Miss Ingram had been a good and noble woman, endowed with force, fervor, kindness, sense, I should have had one vital struggle with two tigers, jealousy and despair. Then, my heart torn out and devoured, I should have admired her, acknowledged her excellence, and been quiet for the rest of my days. And the more absolute her superiority, the deeper would have been my admiration, the more truly tranquil my quiescence. But as matters really stood, to watch Miss Ingram's efforts at fascinating Mr. Rochester, to witness their repeated failure, herself unconscious that they did fail, vainly fancying that each shaft launched hit the mark, and infatuatedly pluming herself on success, when her pride and self-complacency repelled further and further what she wished to allure. To witness this was to be at once under ceaseless excitation and ruthless restraint, because when she failed, I saw how she might have succeeded. Arrows that continually glanced off from Mr. Rochester's breast, and fell harmless at his feet, might, I knew, if shot by a surer hand, have quivered keen in his proud heart, have called love into his stern eye, and softness into his sardonic face, or, better still, without weapons, a silent conquest might have been won. Why can she not influence him more, when she is privileged to draw so near to him? I asked myself. Surely she cannot truly like him, or not like him with true affection. If she did, she need not coin her smiles so lavishly, flash her glances so unremittingly, manufacture airs so elaborate, graces so multitudinous. It seems to me that she might, by merely sitting quietly at his side, saying little and looking less, get nigher his heart. Uh, I have seen in his face a far different expression from that which hardens it now while she is so vivaciously accosting him. But then it came of itself. It was not elicited by metr- meretricious arts and calculated maneuvers, and one had but to accept it, to answer what he asked without presentation, to address him, when needful, without grimace. And it increased and grew kinder and more genial, and warmed one like a fostering sunbeam. How will she manage to please him when they are married? I do not think she will manage it, and yet it might be managed, and his wife might, I verily believe, be the very happiest woman the sun shines on. I have not yet said anything condemnatory of Mr. Rochester's project of marrying for interesting connections. It surprised me when I first discovered that such was his intention. I had thought him a man unlikely to be influenced by motives so commonplace in his choice of wife. But the longer I considered the position, education, etc., of the parties, the less I felt justified in judging and blaming either him or Miss Ingram for acting in conformity to ideas and principles instilled into them, doubtless from their childhood. All their class held these principles. I supposed, then, that they had reasons for holding them such as I could not fathom. It seemed to me that, were I a gentleman like him, I would take to my bosom only such a wife as I could love. But the very obviousness of the advantages to the husband's own happiness offered by this plan convinced me that there must be arguments against its general adoption, of which I was quite ignorant. Otherwise, I felt sure all the world would act as I wished to act. Very, very good point. And I like that she's not condemning him. She's like, no, like, I don't get it, but there has to be something to it. Like, if they're letting themselves be miserable like this, you know? But in other points, as well as this, I was growing very lenient to my master. I was forgetting all his faults, for which I had once kept a sharp lookout. It had formerly been my endeavor to study all sides of his character, to take the bad with the good, and from the just weighing of both to form an equitable judgment. Now I saw no bad. The sarcasm that had repelled, the harshness that had startled me once, were only like keen condiments in a choice dish. Their presence was pungent, but their absence would be felt as comparatively insipid. And as for the vague something, was it a sinister or sorrowful, a designing or desponding expression that opened up a careful observer now and then in his eye, and closed again before one could fathom the strange depth partially disclosed, that something which used to make me fear and shrink, as if I had been wandering amongst volcanic-looking hills, and had suddenly felt the ground quiver and seen it agape. That something I at intervals beheld still, and with throbbing heart, but not with palsied nerves. Instead of wishing to shun, I longed only to dare to divine it, and I thought Miss Ingram happy, because one day she might look into the abyss at her leisure, explore its secrets, and analyze their nature. Meantime, while I thought only of my master and his future bride, saw only them, heard only their discourse, and considered only their movements of importance, the rest of the party were occupied with their own separate interests and pleasures. The ladies Lynn and Ingram continued to consort in solemn conferences, where they nodded their two turbans at each other, and held up their four hands in confronting gestures of surprise, or mystery, or horror. according to the theme on which their gossip ran like a pair of magnified puppets. Mild Mrs. Dent talked with good-natured Mrs. Eshton, and the two sometimes bestowed a courteous word or smile on me. Oh, at least some of them are being nice. Sir George Lynn, Colonel Dent, and Mr. Eshton discussed politics, or county affairs, or justice business. Lord Ingram flirted with Amy Eshton. Louisa played and sang to and with one of the Messrs. Lynn, and Mary Ingram listened languidly to the gallant speeches of the other. Sometimes all, as with one consent, suspended their byplay to observe and listen to the principal actors, for after all, Mr. Rochester, and because closely connected to him, Miss Ingram, were the life and soul of the party. If he was absent from the room an hour, a perceptible dullness seemed to steal over the spirits of his guests, and his re-entrance was sure to give a fresh impulse to the vivacity of conversation. The want of his animating influence appeared to be peculiarly felt one day that he had been summoned to Millcote on business. It was not likely to return till late. The afternoon was wet, a walk the party had proposed to take to see a Romani camp, lately pitched on a common beyond Hay, and consequently deferred. Some of the gentlemen were gone to the stables. The younger ones, together with the younger ladies, were playing billiards in the billiard-room. The dowagers Ingram and Lynn sought solace in a quiet game at cards. Blanche Ingram, after having repelled by supercilious taciturnity some efforts of Mrs. Dent and Mrs. Eshton to draw her into conversation, had first murmured over some sentimental tunes and airs on the piano, and then, having fetched a novel from the library, had flung herself in haughty listlessness on a sofa, and prepared to beguile, by the spell of fiction, the tedious hours of absence. The room and the house were silent. Only now and then the merriment of the billiard players was heard from above. Uh, it was verging on dusk, and the clock had already given warning of the hour to dress for dinner, when little Adele, who knelt by me in the drawing-room window-seat, suddenly exclaimed, "Voilà, Monsieur Rochester, qui revient!" I turned, and Miss Ingram darted forwards from her sofa. The others, too, looked up from their several occupations, for at the same time a crunching of wheels and a splashing tramp of horse-hoofs became audible on the wet gravel. A post-chaise was approaching. "What can possess him to come home in that style?" said Miss Ingram. "He rode Mesrour, the black horse, did he not, when he went out? And Pilot was with him. What has he done with the animals?" As she said this, she approached her tall person and ample garments so near the window that I was obliged to bend back almost to the breaking of my spine. In her eagerness she did not observe me at first, but when she did, she curled her lip and moved to another casement. The post-chaise stopped. The driver rang the doorbell, and a gentleman alighted attired in travelling garb, but it was not Mr. Rochester. It was a tall, fashionable-looking man, a stranger. "How provoking!" exclaimed Miss Ingram. "You tiresome monkey," apostrophizing Adele. "Who perched you up in the window to give false intelligence?" And she cast on me an angry glance, as if I were in fault. Some parleying was audible in the hall, and soon the newcomer entered. He bowed to Lady Ingram, and as deeming her the eldest lady present. "It appears I come at an inopportune time, madam," said he, "when my friend Mr. Rochester is from home. But I arrive from a very long journey, and I think I may presume so far on old and intimate acquaintances as to install myself here till he returns. Easy. Yeah, just like he's like, hey man, I've had a long fucking trip. Let me rest, man. His manner was polite. His accent in speaking struck me as being somewhat unusual. Not precisely foreign, but still not altogether English. His age might be about Mr. Rochester's, between 30 and 40. His complexion was singularly sallow. Otherwise, he was a fine-looking man, at first sight especially. On closer examination, you detected something in his face that displeased, or rather that failed to please. His features were regular, but too relaxed. His eye was large and well cut, but the life looking out of it was a tame, vacant life. At least so I thought. The sound of the dressing bell dispersed the party. It was not till after dinner that I saw him again. He then seemed quite at his ease, but I liked his physiognomy even less than before. It struck me as being at the same time unsettled and inanimate. His wide eye wandered, and had no meaning in its wandering. This gave him an odd look, such as I never remembered to have seen. For a handsome and not unamiable-looking man, he repelled me exceedingly. There was no power in that smooth-skinned face of a full oval shape, no firmness in that aquiline nose and small cherry mouth. There was no thought on the low, even forehead, no command in that blank brown eye. As I sat in my usual nook and looked at him with the light of the girandoles on the mantelpiece beaming full over him, for he occupied an armchair drawn close to the fire, and kept shrinking still nearer, as if he were cold, I compared him with Mr. Rochester. I think, with deference be it spoken, the contrast could not be much greater between a sleek gander and a fierce falcon, between a meek sheep and the rough-coated, keen-eyed dog, its guardian. He had spoken of Mr. Rochester as an old friend. A curious friendship theirs must have been. A pointed illustration, indeed, of the old adage of extremes meet, or opposites attract. Two or three of the gentlemen sat near him, and I caught at times scraps of their conversation across the room. At first I could not make much sense of what I heard, for the discourse of Louisa Eshton and Mary Ingram, who sat nearer to me, confused the fragmentary sentences that reached me at intervals. These last were discussing the stranger. They both called him a beautiful man. Louisa said he was a love of a creature, and she adored him, and Mary instanced his pretty little mouth and nice nose as her ideal of the charming. Yeah, he seems really soft. He seems delicate. And what of a sweet-tempered forehead he has! Oh, God, cried Louisa. So smooth. None of those frowning irregularities I dislike so much. And such a placid eye and smile. And then, to my great relief, Mr. Henry Lynn summoned them to the other side of the room to settle some point about the deferred excursion to Hay Common. I was now able to concentrate my attention on the group by the fire, and I presently gathered that the newcomer was called Mr. Mason. Then I learned that he was but just arrived in England, and that he came from some hot country, which was the reason, doubtless, his face was so sallow, and that he sat so near the hearth, and wore a surtout in the house. Presently the words Jamaica, Kingston, Spanish Town indicated the West Indies as his residence, and it was with no little surprise I gathered, ere long, that he had there first seen and become acquainted with Mr. Rochester. He spoke of his friend's dislike of the burning heats, the hurricanes, and rainy seasons of that region, I knew Mr. Rochester had been a traveler. Mrs. Fairfax had said so, but I thought the continent of Europe had bounded his wanderings. Till now I had never heard a hint given of visits to more distant shores. I was pondering these things when an incident, and a somewhat unexpected one, broke the thread of my musings. Mr. Mason, shivering as some one chanced to open the door, asked for more coal to be put in the fire, which had burnt out its flame, though its mass of cinder still shone hot and red. The footman who brought the coal, in going out, stopped near Mr. Eshton's chair, and said something to him in a low voice, of which I heard only the words "old woman," quite troublesome. Tell her she shall be put in the stocks if she does not take herself off, replied the magistrate. No, stop, interrupted Colonel Dent. Don't send her away, Ashton. We might turn the thing to account. Better consult the ladies. And speaking aloud, he continued, Ladies, you talked of going to Hay Common to visit the Romani camp. Sam here says that one of the old Mother Bunches is in the servants' hall at this moment and insists upon being brought in before the quality to tell them their fortunes. Would you like to see her? Surely, Colonel, cried Lady Ingram, you would not encourage such a low impostor. Dismiss her by all means at once. But I cannot persuade her to go away, my lady, said the footman, nor can any of the servants. Mrs. Fairfax is with her just now, entreating her to be gone. But she has taken a chair in the chimney corner, and says nothing shall stir her from it till she gets leave to come in here. What does she want? Asked Mrs. Eshton. To tell the gentry their fortunes, she says, ma'am, and she swears she must and will do it. What is she like? Inquired Mrs. Eshton in a breath. A shockingly ugly old creature, miss, almost as black as a crock. Oh, that's fucked up. Don't be mean. Why, she's a real sorceress, cried Frederick Lynn. Let us have her in, of course. To be sure, rejoined his brother, it would be 1,000 pities to throw away such a chance of fun. I don't like that these guys are being dicks. You guys are being really rude. My dear boys, what are you thinking about? Exclaimed Mrs. Lynn. I cannot possibly countenance any such inconsistent proceeding, chimed in the Dowager Ingram. Indeed, mamma, but you can and will, pronounced the haughty voice of Blanche, as she turned round on the piano stool, where till now she had sat silent, apparently examining sundry sheets of music. I have a curiosity to hear my fortune told. Therefore, Sam, order the beldam forward. Okay. My darling Blanche, recollect. I recollect all you can suggest, and I must have my will. Quick, Sam. Yes, 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 cried all the juveniles, both ladies and gentlemen. Let her come, it'll be excellent sport. God, dicks, assholes. The footman still lingered. She looks such a rough one, said he. Go, yelled Miss Ingram, and the man went. Excitement instantly seized the whole party. A running fire of raillery and jests was proceeding when Sam returned. She won't come now, said he. She says it's not her mission to appear before the vulgar herd. Them's her words. I must show her into a room by herself, and then those who wish to consult her must go to her one by one. You see now, my queenly Blanche, said Lady Ingram, she encroaches. Be advised, my angel girl, and show her into the library, of course, cut in the angel girl. It is not my mission to listen to her before the vulgar herd either. I mean to have her all to myself. Is there a fire in the library? Yes, ma'am, but she looks such a tinkler. I don't know what that means. Cease that chatter, blockhead, and do my bidding. Oh my god, I hate this bitch. Again Sam vanished, and mystery, animation, expectation rose to full flow once more. She's ready now, said the footman, as he reappeared. She wishes to know who will be her first visitor. I think I had better just look in upon her before any of the ladies go, said Colonel Dent. Tell her, Sam, a gentleman is coming. Sam went and returned. She says, sure, sir, that she'll have no gentlemen. They need not trouble themselves to come near her, nor, he added, with difficulty suppressing a titter, any ladies either, except the young and single. By Jove, she has taste, exclaimed Henry Lynn. Miss Ingram rose solemnly. I go first, she said, in a tone which might have befitted the leader of a forlorn hope, mounting a breach in the van of his men. "Oh, my best, oh, my dearest, pause, reflect," was her mamma's cry, but she swept past her in stately silence, passed through the door, which Colonel Dent held open, and we heard her enter the library. A comparative silence ensued. Lady Ingram thought it Lisa to wring her hands, which she did accordingly. Miss Mary declared she felt for her part she never dared venture. Amy and Louisa Eshton tittered under their breath and looked a little frightened. The minutes passed very slowly. 15 were counted before the library door again opened. Miss Ingram returned to us through the arch. Would she laugh? Would she take it as a joke? All eyes met her with a glance of eager curiosity, and she met all eyes with one of rebuff and coldness. She looked neither flurried nor merry. She walked stiffly to her seat, and took in silence. Well, Blanche, said Lord Ingram. What does she say, sister? Asked Mary. What did you think? How do you feel? Is she a real fortune-teller? Demanded Mrs. Eshton. Now, good people, Miss Ingram, don't press upon me. Really, your organs of wonder and credulity are easily excited. You seem, by the importance of you all, my good mamma included, ascribe to this matter, absolutely to believe we have a genuine witch in the house, who is in close alliance with the old gentleman. I have seen a Romany vagabond. She has practised in hackneyed fashion the science of palmistry, and told me what such people usually tell. My whim is gratified, and now I think Mr. Eshton will do well to put the hag in the stocks tomorrow morning, as he threatened. Ooh, I think she heard something she didn't like. Miss Ingram took a book, leant back in her chair, and so declined further conversation. I watched her for nearly half an hour. During all that time, she never turned a page, and her face grew darker, more dissatisfied, and more sourly expressive of disappointment. She had obviously not heard anything to her advantage, and it seemed to me, from her prolonged fit of gloom and taciturnity, that she herself, notwithstanding her professed indifference, attached undue importance to whatever revelations had been made her. Meantime, Mary Ingram, Amy, and Louisa Eshton declared they dared not go alone, and yet they all wished to go. A negotiation was opened through the medium of the ambassador Sam, and after much pacing to and fro, till I think the Sam's calves must have ached with the exercise, permission was at last, with great difficulty, extorted from the rigorous Sybil, for the three to wait upon her in a body. Their visit was not so still as Miss Ingram's had been. We heard hysterical giggling and little shrieks proceeding from the library, and at the end of about 20 minutes they burst the door open and came running across the hall, as if they were half scared out of their wits. I'm sure she is something not right, they cried, one and all. She told us such things. She knows all about us, and they sank breathless into the various seats the gentleman hastened to bring them. Pressed for further explanation, they declared she had told them of things they had said and done when they were mere children, described books and ornaments they had in their boudoirs at home, keepsakes that different relations had presented to them. They affirmed that she had even divined their thoughts, and had whispered in the ear of each the name of the person she liked best in the world, and informed them of what they most wished for. Ooh. creepy. I like it. I'm into it. Here the gentleman interposed with earnest petitions to be further enlightened on these two last named points, but they got only blushes, yells, tremors, and titters in return for their importunity. The matrons, meantime, offered vignettes and wielded fans, and again reiterated the expression of their concern that their warning had not been taken in time, and the elder gentlemen laughed, and the younger urged their services on the agitated fair ones. In the midst of the tumult, and while my eyes and ears were fully engaged in the scene before me, I heard a hem close at my elbow. I turned and saw Sam. "If you please, miss, the woman declares that there is another young single lady in the room who has not been to her yet, and she swears she will not go till she has seen all. I thought it must be you. There is no one else for it. What shall I tell her?" "Oh, I will go by all means," I answered, and I was glad of the unexpected opportunity to gratify my much excited curiosity. I slipped out of the room, unobserved by any eye, for the company were gathered in one mass about the trembling trio just returned, and I closed the door quietly behind me. "If you like, miss," said Sam, "I'll wait in the hall for you, and if she frightens you, just call and I'll come." "No, Sam, return to the kitchen. I am not in the least afraid." Nor was I, but I was a good deal interested and excited. And you know what? We're gonna actually end the reading here. I know, so unfair, so unfair. I'm really curious too, trust me. But I'm going to have my reading streams be a little bit shorter than the others, because once Tiny Human gets home, he tends to be a little bit loud, and that makes these sorts of things a little bit difficult. Mm. So for now, I'm gonna just like talk for like 4 minutes so we can end at a neat little 10-minute marker. Uh anyway, I feel like I know exactly what the woman said to Miss Ingram. Oh my god. She probably was like, "Hey, he doesn't love you. He's never going to love you. You're a bitch." She's like, "I don't believe you." And she just told her a whole bunch of like secrets or whatever. Maybe even that Mr. Rochester's heart belongs to another. Because he really does seem like so much more into Jane. Because, she has her own freaking mind. And she challenges him, but like also respects him. It's like a very good combination of things that she is. Because she's not bitchy, right? She's not judgmental. She's just a generally. Sorry about that. She's just a generally kind, curious person that likes learning about things and likes talking about things. I know it's difficult at times when one person wants to be conversational and they want to learn things and they like sharing information. I know it can be very hard when conversations feel one-sided or like only one person is invested or interested in the conversations. And I feel like that's kind of what Mr. Rochester's dreading with his bride to be. I feel like he really doesn't want some brainless moron. But I also could be being just petty because she's really bitchy and I don't like her. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly. I'm getting excited and I'm getting nervous. I'm getting so nervous. Like, genuinely, like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Are they gonna be happy? Are they gonna end up together, or is it gonna be like a eternal, like, it's gonna be like an eternal cucking situation? Because I'm not down for that. I'm not into that. I don't want that to happen. I really would rather not. But anyway, I am going to be streaming Yakuza again on Thursday. I might start streaming on Wednesdays too. We're figuring out the stream schedules and everything. But uh the reading streams are here and they're back and I'm going to keep doing them. I promise. I pinky promise. Okay. For now though, I hope you all have a lovely day. Drink some tea, get cozy, have a nice little chill day at the very beginning of your week. And I hope you have a lovely one. And I hope to see you on Thursday with some energetic chaos. Okay, bye. Bye bye. Bye.